still remember the moment everything cracked. The room was quiet, sunlight slanting through the blinds of my office, the same one I'd built from nothing. Bare walls, secondhand desks, the smell of coffee and hope. My son stood across from me, jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. I could feel it before he even spoke. The betrayal was already in the air, humming like an electric current. When he said the words, "It's not your company anymore, Mom," the world stopped. I laughed, because sometimes the mind protects you with disbelief. Surely he was joking, but he wasn't. My own child, the boy I'd raised to be kind and clever, had taken every paper, every signature, every ounce of trust I handed him, and used it to take everything from me. For a second, I thought I might collapse. The office I built suddenly felt foreign. My name still glowed in gold letters on the glass door, but it meant nothing now. He stood there like a stranger in my son's body, wearing an expensive suit I paid for, speaking in a tone that didn't belong to family. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just sat there, gripping the armrest, pretending I hadn't just lost decades of work in a single afternoon. You ever had that moment when your heart knows something your mind can't accept yet? That was me. I looked at him and saw both the child who once brought me drawings and the man who just stabbed me in the back with a legal document. What would you have done in my shoes? Beg him to stop? Or sit in silence and let the pain earn itself into memory? The first betrayal didn't come out of nowhere. The signs were there, but I'd been too blind with love to see them. When my husband died, I threw myself into the company. It was my way of surviving, keeping our dream alive. My son was still young then, barely out of college. I trained him, trusted him, made him my second in command. I told myself I was preparing him for his future. Turns out I was preparing him to steal mine. He started changing after his promotion. Flashier clothes, new friends, a sharper tongue. He'd show up late to meetings, undermine my decisions, charm clients I spent years nurturing. I thought it was ambition. I told myself he just needed space to prove himself. But the truth was uglier. He was building loyalty around himself, using my name, my reputation, my network to replace me piece by piece. I was too busy loving him to notice I was handing him the keys. The day before it all happened, he took me to dinner. He was warm, attentive, even called me Mom in that soft voice he used as a kid. We talked about the future, the next expansion, a new partnership overseas. He told me I deserved a break, that I'd worked too hard for too long. Looking back, that dinner was his goodbye. He already knew what he was about to do. After he left me with nothing but a folder full of legal papers and the hollow echo of his words, I sat in that office until the cleaning crew arrived. They didn't even recognize me. Just another woman sitting alone in a place that no longer belonged to her. I went home to an empty house, poured a glass of wine, and stared at the framed photo on the wall. Me and him, at the grand opening of the company's first office. He was smiling wide, his arm around my shoulder. I touched the glass and whispered, "What did I do wrong?" That night, sleep never came. Every memory turned into a question, every kindness a clue I'd missed. I kept hearing his voice, "It's not your company anymore." The sentence played like a broken record, and every replay sharpened my resolve. The pain started to change shape. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was fuel. In the morning, I didn't cry. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and began listing every single thing he'd taken. My shares, my clients, my team, my dignity. But then I realized something he didn't take. My knowledge. He might have stolen the company, but he couldn't erase the woman who built it. That's when the thought first flickered. Revenge. Not the violent kind you see in movies. The slow, surgical kind that creeps under the surface until it's too late to stop. I didn't even know what form it would take yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Over the next few weeks, I became invisible. No calls, no confrontation, just silence. He probably thought I was broken, out of the picture. He underestimated me again. I spent my days reading every clause in those contracts I once trusted him with. I talked to old clients, not as a CEO, but as a friend. I found out things, whispers of deals he'd cut, debts he'd hidden, promises he couldn't keep. Every detail went into a notebook, page after page, a blueprint of his empire's weak spots. I wasn't rushing. You can't rush revenge. It needs time to breathe, to ripen. And as the days passed, something strange happened. The more I learned, the less angry I felt. The anger cooled into precision. The love I had for him didn't vanish. It just changed shape, turned into something sharper. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you'd give your life for, you know that shift. It's the moment your heart stops begging for answers and starts planning outcomes. I remember walking past the building one evening. My name had already been replaced on the front. His name gleamed in the fading sunlight, bold and proud. But inside, I could still see the cracks. Staff leaving early, whispered arguments behind glass doors. He might have taken my crown, but he didn't know how to wear it. As I watched from across the street, a thought crossed my mind so clear it almost made me smile. He built his future on my foundation, and I know exactly where it's weakest. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The notebook still open on the table beside me. The pages looked like a crime board. Names, dates, deals, tiny arrows connecting everything my son had twisted into his new kingdom. I ran my fingers down one line again and again. Leighton Holdings. Partner transfer paperwork, signed 2 weeks before takeover. That's when I realized how deep it went. He'd started shifting control months before he confronted me. Every signature I gave him for convenience was a piece of rope he was patiently braiding into a noose for me. I could have gone public, shouted betrayal to the press, but that would have made me look desperate and weak. Instead, I chose silence. Silence scares powerful people more than screaming. I called an old friend, Michael, my first accountant before my son replaced him with a younger, glossier team. I need information, I said. He hesitated only a second. Whatever you need, he answered. Loyalty built on years doesn't die easily. Together, we traced every company my son had touched since the takeover. He was overextending, buying things too quickly, using the company's credit as if it were his personal wallet. Greed always makes people sloppy. For weeks, I gathered threads. Every night, I'd add another note, another receipt, another whispered confession from someone who still respected me. By the time the notebook was half full, a plan was taking shape. Not revenge by destruction, but by revelation. My son had taken my name off the door. I was going to make sure that door collapsed under its own weight. One afternoon, I sat at a cafe near the office. I hadn't been that close since he threw me out. Through the window, I saw him stepping from his car, phone pressed to his ear, smiling that same charming smile that used to melt me. For a second, I almost felt proud again. Then I remembered what that smile had cost me. I whispered to myself, let him enjoy it. Every empire looks stable right before it crumbles. I began contacting former clients, quietly, respectfully. I told them I was starting something new, a smaller consultancy, more personal. I didn't badmouth him. I didn't have to. They'd already heard rumors of missed deadlines, staff quitting, late invoices. My new venture was barely an idea, but to them it sounded like a return to the values they missed. Within a month, I had enough interest to file new papers. The name? Phoenix Strategies. Rising from ashes felt fitting. When I signed those papers, I felt something loosen in my chest. The first brick of my comeback was laid. Still, I wasn't ready to confront him. Revenge needed momentum. It had to grow quietly until it became undeniable. Then came the investors' conference. My son was scheduled to present a huge expansion project, the one that would prove he was a visionary leader. I attended as a guest, uninvited but not
unrecognized. He froze when he saw me across the hall. I just smiled and lifted my glass. During his presentation, he stuttered once, twice, but finished strong. Everyone clapped. He thought he'd won again.
The next morning, half the investors received anonymous envelopes, copies of documents showing how company funds had been misused for personal purchases, luxury cars, a penthouse, private travel. Every number was accurate. Every signature was his. I didn't forge a thing. I simply handed people the truth they deserved to see. Within days, whispers turned to headlines. Young CEO faces internal audit. Questionable spending clouds expansion deal. I watched from home, sipping coffee, the same way he had probably watched me crumble a year earlier. Karna, I thought, doesn't always need violence. Sometimes it just needs a spreadsheet. He called me that evening. "Did you do this?" His voice cracked between anger and fear. "I did nothing," I said calmly. "I just told the truth." "You're ruining me." "No, sweetheart," I replied. "You did that yourself." For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. But the story wasn't over. The audit forced him to step down temporarily, and the board reached out to me for consultation. The irony was delicious. The woman he discarded was now being asked to rescue the very company he'd stolen. I accepted, not out of spite, well, maybe a little, but because I wanted to rebuild it properly. Still, part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. I'd raised him, after all. I'd loved him more than I loved my own rest. Seeing him cornered stirred something soft in me again, but then I'd remember his voice from that day. "It's not your company anymore, Mom. Choices have echoes." As I walked into the boardroom for the first time since the takeover, every eye followed me, some with pity, others with respect. He was there too, slumped at the end of the table, eyes hollow. I nodded to him, businesslike. The meeting began. The first words out of my mouth were, "Let's fix what's broken." And that's where the next chapter really started. Not just taking back what he stole, but showing him what leadership actually looks like. The meeting ended with polite applause, the kind people give when they're not sure who just won. My son avoided my eyes as everyone filtered out. For a moment, it was only us, the same office where he'd once told me I was no longer needed. He looked smaller somehow, as if the expensive suit could no longer hold him together. "Mom," he began, voice low, "I never meant it for it to go this far." I wanted to believe him, but meaning doesn't erase consequences. I said quietly, "You wanted power. Now you've met it." I gathered my files and walked out before he could reply. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a slow sunrise. Each day, a little more light returned. I wasn't just cleaning up his mess, I was rebuilding the company's soul. Transparent contracts, fair pay, genuine communication. Clients who had left started calling again. The press, once obsessed with scandal, began printing stories about a quiet turnaround led by a woman who refused to quit. Every success stung him a little more. He still held shares, but he'd lost the board's faith. The empire he'd stolen was slipping through his fingers, one corrected balance sheet at a time. I didn't have to sabotage him. All I had to do was show competence where he shone arrogance. Truth was my revenge. But at night, when the office lights dimmed, I'd still think about the boy who used to wait outside my door with drawings and cookies. That boy hadn't planned to betray me. Ambition had hollowed him out over time, whispering that love was weakness. Sometimes I wondered if I could have stopped it earlier. Maybe I'd been too busy being the boss to keep being his mother. Then came the shareholder meeting, the one the media called the reckoning. Every major investor, every journalist, every employee packed into the hall. I was presenting our recovery plan. He was supposed to give an update on personal accountability. When I stepped on the stage, cameras flashed. I told the story of the company's renewal, not with blame, but with truth. How integrity, once lost, could be rebuilt. How family, once fractured, could at least learn from its scars. Then I turned to him. This business was founded on trust, and trust can't be inherited. It must be earned every single day. He looked down, eyes glistening. The room was silent, and for the first time since the betrayal, I felt something that wasn't anger. It was release. Afterwards, he approached me in the corridor. No cameras now, no audience. He said, "You won." I shook my head. No one wins in a story like ours. We just survive it. He nodded, and for a fleeting second, I saw the boy again, not the rival. "I'm sorry, Mom." I believed him. Maybe not completely, but enough to let the words land. I said, "Make something of yourself. But this time, do it honestly." He left the company a month later. I didn't stop him. Some lessons need distance to sink in. The following year, the business thrived under new leadership. Mine, tempered by patience and pain. Awards came, articles too, calling me resilient, brilliant, unstoppable. They didn't know the truth. I wasn't unstoppable. I just learned how to start again after being stopped by someone I loved most. Sometimes, late at night, I still get an email from him. Short updates, polite, cautious. He's trying to rebuild somewhere else, smaller, humbler. I always reply. Maybe forgiveness isn't a door you open all at once. Maybe it's a window you leave unlatched. Looking back, I realized revenge was never really about destroying him. It was about reclaiming myself. When he took my company, he didn't just steal my work. He tried to rewrite who I was. Taking it back wasn't payback. It was recovery. If you've ever been betrayed by family, you know the ache never fully disappears. But it softens when you find meaning inside it. Be honest. Would you have waited as long as I did? Or would you have struck back the moment you lost everything? For me, patience was the sharpest weapon. And when justice finally arrived, it didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, like dawn through glass, steady, certain, unstoppable. Because, in the end, he underestimated one thing. A mother's revenge isn't rage, it's resilience. And that, more than anything he took from me, is what he'll never own. When I tell this story now, people always ask if I regret anything. I think about that a lot. Part of me wishes I'd seen the signs earlier, saved us both from the fall. But the truth is, sometimes life has to strip you bare before it reminds you who you are. I lost my company, my pride, even my faith in family for a while. But in that silence, I rebuilt everything on stronger ground.
Revenge wasn't the ending. It was the bridge back to myself. Watching him walk away that final day, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. Because I finally understood that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You survived." So now, when I see his emails pop up,
Small updates about his new job, or a question about the old recipes I used to make. I answer. Short messages, simple words. I don't reopen the past, but I don't close the door either. Maybe that's the hardest revenge of all. Living well enough that forgiveness becomes a choice, not a weakness. And maybe, if you're listening right now, you've felt that same kind of betrayal. Maybe someone you trusted turned their back on you and you don't know if you should fight or let go. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. Revenge isn't about hurting them. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to take. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have waited, planned, rebuilt in silence? Or would you have struck back fast and loud? I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever had to start again after someone broke your trust, remember, you're not weak for surviving. You're proof that some fires don't burn you down. They forge you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt something, share it. And if you want more stories like this, of betrayal, resilience, and quiet revenge, stay with me. There's always another tale waiting in the shadows, another reminder that strength isn't born from comfort. It's born from the moment you refuse to disappear. Because in the end, that's what I did. I refused to disappear. And that, more than any plan or payback, was my greatest revenge.